International Media TV, television that listens to you. Hi, I'm Johnnie Burrell. Welcome to the program. Today my guest is Christine Uomini. She's a certified iridologist, and she's going to help us with how we can maintain and achieve good health through the reading of the eye. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Johnnie. How are you?
I'm fine, and thanks a lot for the interview. Let's begin by telling our audience, what is iridology? What is the study of the eye?
Iridology is looking at the colored portion of the eye, the iris, and looking for markings that will help us determine the condition of our health.
You had some health concerns a while ago. I think you were fatigue and sleeplessness, and you decided to look for an alternative way of healing yourself. Why did you choose iridology, and how did you get into the practice of iridology?
Yes, actually what happened was I had visited a number of doctors trying to determine what was going on with my health. And so the iridology was more of a happy accident. The naturopath that I visited for some help happened to be an iridologist.
So you didn't actively seek an iridologist when you got there.
Exactly.
So that's what the happy accident is all about.
Exactly.
What is the origins of iridology? I did a little research before we had this interview, and I understand it's pretty well known in the Arab countries, and it's also widely practiced in Europe. We don't hear a lot about it here in the United States. Why?
Well, I think why we don't hear a lot about alternative ways of dealing with our health is because, for the most part, we watch television, and medicine and taking medicine is what we see on television.
When you did the iridologist, when you did see him or her, what did he or she recommend to you with regard to getting better and feeling, getting back to normal?
Right, so I was really tired and exhausted, and I had tests done to see if there was some underlying cause. I did have blood tests done, and the blood tests showed that I was fine. But of course I knew that I wasn't fine. For me, I was having trouble getting up in the morning, and I was going to bed far too early. I felt far too early. So when I made my way finally to a naturopath, we looked at the colon, and we looked at, where it would be, and I got to see my own eye, and we saw that there was some irritation to the liver. So. And
he or she was it a male or female?
It was a female.
And she could tell from the markings that you had inflammation?
And irritated. There actually was a reddening spot in the liver area, so that showed irritation.
I see.
So for her, how she explained it to me was that my colon I had an issue with my colon. My colon was dirty, and that in order for the liver to throw the garbage out, it throws it into the colon. But the colon was having a problem, so the colon was throwing the garbage right back to the liver. And the liver irritation and those issues, that was one of the issues, was causing the fatigue.
Can you detect a disease or an oncoming problem with regard to disease by reading the eye?
Oh yeah, certainly. That is the whole purpose of actually looking at the iris. Looking at the iris, we get to see different spots, markings, and with studying what these markings mean, then we can know what is happening to the person's body. We have a clear picture.
I know with acupressure and acupuncture, I did an interview about when the Green Festival was here in San Francisco, and this lady worked with the ears, and she said that you can tell a lot from, and work with the needles, a lot from where disease might occur just looking at the ear, and I guess with the eyes, it's somewhat the same. Am I right?
Yeah, I've had that experience actually by having an acupuncturist touch different parts of the ear. It's a reflexology. So different parts of the ear, if you press it and it's really sensitive, then that means a certain thing.
So if you read a client's eye and they came to you and you saw something that might occur, for example, what are some of the recommendations you might give them, or what treatments?
Well, a lot of what happens for people is they're fatigued. And
do you get a lot of that? A lot of clients
or they're
come
very
to you?
stressed. Yeah, a lot of people come for fatigue. A lot of people come for anxiety. There are a variety of things, of course, that people have, and especially when people are overly stressed or sleep deprived. So depending on what the iris shows, that determines what I'm going to tell the person who comes in and how to go about fixing that.
Maybe I should have, you should have read my eye. I had eye surgery about 2 months ago, and I have a stent. You're looking at the scar now, and also the little blue line that you see is the stent. It'll be in there for another month. So, but I had clogged tear duct, and it was pretty severe. So surgery, in my mind at that time, was the only answer. Had I come to you and you read my eye, what might you have seen?
That's a very good question, Johnny, and it's hard to just say exactly what I would have seen, and it's always such an interesting thing to read somebody's eyes and actually be surprised when you finally look at the iris. I might have seen a white area for the eye. I might have seen lymphatic congestion, which is a different sign. I might have seen venous arterial congestion. And cholesterol. So it really, there are a variety of things that may have shown up, and it's hard for me to say what
would have shown up.
Exactly.
But you would have been able to tell that there was something going on
I would have been
with
able
my
to
eyes. What is the most common complaint? Nervousness, and what about emotional issues when people come to you and they, the issues turn out to be emotional? For example, if relationships, for example, you know, we know a lot of things goes on with that, and it manifests itself in terms of people's health malfunctioning. Do you get a lot of how different is that? Versus maybe physical? That's
a really good question. And of course, the emotional, the psychic, the psychological, all these things affect the physical body. If a person is in a relationship that causes a lot of stress, that will show up as stress, and we'll look at that. People always bring their emotions along with them into the office. You know?
Whether they think they do or
Whether
not.
they're talking about it or not, it's right there. And oftentimes the line of questioning, because of what I see in the iris, will bring us to the point of talking about, we have to talk about a really complete picture of what's happening with the person, and that's part of it.
You're going to give us an overview, you're going to teach us a lesson a little later on in the program to show us just all the things that happen with regard to our iridology. But before that, what do you recommend for people? Can a person read their own eyes? Do you teach people how to do that? Is there a way, for example, that a person could look at their eyes and tell some basic things?
Yes, actually, that's a really good question.
I have a lot of good questions today.
So what I do oftentimes in an herbal hour is bring the self-scopes, which are a mirror, and people can look at their own iris. A self-scope?
Self-scope.
It's a mirror that has a light attachment. It's a piece of equipment, and that piece of equipment allows a person to look at their own eye. But I think also people can just get a flashlight and maybe a mirror that is a little bit of an enlarging mirror, not the regular mirror, and get a view of their own iris.
Before the interview, you talked about a man with regard to the origin of iridology and how it came to be the lion and the... Tell us that story.
It was an owl.
An owl.
Yes. So there was...
Well, first of all, the question was...
the question was what was the origin
right.
of iridology.
Right.
Yes, and there is probably a couple of answers for that. One of the answers is a young man at the age of 11, and I don't know how to say his first name exactly, Ignatz von Pexley. I can say the last name. He was tussling with an owl. He had an owl in his grasp, and the owl's leg broke, and he noticed a line showing up immediately in the iris of the owl when that happened. And he went on to become a doctor and be one of the first people to map the iris for the left and right.
How long ago was this?
That was in the early 1800s.
The early 1800s. Excuse me. Alternative medicines, acupressure, acupuncture, do you work with, when you give recommendations or herbs to people who are having problems with their health, do you recommend alternative medicines? And we don't want to leave out traditional medicine also, because we know that traditional medicines have contributed, not have, but still do contribute to people healing. Mm-hmm. But how much of alternative practices do you recommend? For example, would you say take herbs, and also I think you should get some acupressure, get some massage. Get acupuncture? Oh
yeah, I recommend a lot of different things, depending on what's going on for the person. I recommend I have a lot of colleagues, and they do different things, and so depending on what the person is suffering from, I can recommend that they get additional help with that practitioner.
What about young kids? 5 to 10, 12, 15 years old.
Oh,
how does that work? How does iridology work? Does it work pretty much the same with,
it works the
in terms
same
of reading?
way.
And would you see the same kinds of onsets?
Yes, you would see the genetic heritage in a child just as much as you would see the genetic heritage in an adult. The thing that you have to do with a child is you have to look very quickly, because children do not sit still to have their eye read. So you just have to do it, and the time that you're allotted, look as quickly as you can where at the area that you think is going to be the problem area.
Well, I think one of the things that has worked for you is that you're a photographer also. So you at one time was looking at the lens or through the lens, and now you're looking at the lens. How much has that helped you with the work that you're doing with regard to iridology?
It's really helped a lot. What happens when you're a photographer is you have to look at detail. So of course
we're looking at some of your work now, and you do beautiful work, Christine.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Finish. So I was going to say that now instead of looking through the lens, I look, or through the iris, I look at the iris, and photography has helped me to look at
focus.
things and to find the details. Yeah.
Which eyes are harder to read? Brown eyes, dark eyes, blue eyes? Which eye is harder to read?
I think personally the brown eye can be more difficult, because brown eyes have the pigmentation is different. It's darker and it's a little bit harder to see. And blue and green eyes are easier. And of course, also eyes that can be very sensitive to light. So for people who have these deficiencies in vitamins, may not be able to handle the light very easily. So they might blink and close their eye, and so of course that is more difficult too. What
are some other questions that people ask you about iridology? I mean, I mapped out a few before the interview, but
I'm sorry, say that again?
What are some other questions people come to you with regard to iridology?
Usually people have a specific issue. Everybody comes to the office with something that's really their first priority, and then they may have a second and a third priority, but there's usually one thing that is really concerning them, and or something that they've lived with for years, and they come and their concern is that they want to feel better. They might have been experiencing pain their whole life. They might have been born a certain way and experienced difficulties their whole life.
I understand that the accuracy rate in the Arab countries and even the European countries is 93%. with regard to diagnosing and detecting. That's a very high rate.
High percentage,
and I think
yes.
it speaks to just the effectiveness of the practice. Are you ready to give us a lesson and an overview?
Yes, I certainly am.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, thanks. So let's look at the schematic of the iris. Here's a three-dimensional schematic representation of the iris. And the pupil would be located right in here in the middle. The whites of the eyes would be on the outside. These fibers are called trabeculae. And this, where there's a little bit of change, is called the autonomic nerve wreath. And this is hooking up the nervous system. These fibers, called the trabeculae, are living and move. So as the tissues either become inflamed or heal, they move accordingly. These fibers on the inside, between the autonomic nerve wreath and the pupil, are the stomach and the colon. How iridology works is everything, all tissues in the human body are connected through the nervous system. Everything on the left-hand side is crossing over one time and crossing over again, ending up in the left iris. Everything on the right-hand side of the body is crossing over one time and a second time and ending up in the right iris. Everything midline is in both irises. This is a little map and a little description of how the fibers are distributed in a good constitution. As we move to the right, we see that the fibers are more disturbed, and even more disturbed as we get to the fifth example. This would be considered a weakened constitution where there are many dark petals and disturbed fibers. So the strong constitution is tight, evenly distributed trabeculae, strong and vital genetic heritage, and a body able to resist illness and disease, and it recovers quickly. Here is a blue iris, and you can see that the fibers are close together and pretty straight. Here is an example of a brown iris, and you can see the velvet. And there's no disturbance in this. This is a good constitution. Let's look at a weak constitution. This would be characterized by daisy petals, open spaces, and separated trabeculae. A poor genetic heritage, body tissues that are weak, the likelihood of illness or disease is increased when the body is abused. Slow to recover and heal. So you can see how the daisy petal design characterizes a weaker constitution than what we saw before. The strong constitution, of course, that person is able to abuse their body, but over time, they many times end up with a health crisis. And the person with the weakened or the poor constitution, they're used to how their body is from an early on age, and they learn to work with it and are not so easily, they don't abuse it as much as somebody with a strong constitution. Here is a brown iris with daisy petals and weaknesses in it, and this is considered a weakened constitution. Let's look at what toxicity might look like in an iris. Areas of discoloration or darkening not genetically pigmented. In other words, these are things that have accumulated over time, but the person was not born with it. The tissues are toxic laden, and the organs are holding and absorbing these toxic substances. So you can see here the toxicity, which is brown, orangish brown. And you can see the autonomic nerve wreath not that well because this toxicity is obscuring our view and sitting right on top of it. Let's look at some PSORAs or hyperpigmentation. These are spots or colors randomly distributed about the iris. These are inherited, and they indicate a settlement from drugs or waste or toxicity or chemicals. You can see them here. These are orange-brown spots. Now we're going to look at lesions or lacunae. These are areas of broken, expanded, or separated trabeculae or iris radial fibers. They can be open or closed in structure, and this indicates tissue weakness or underactivity according to the depth or the darkness. Now we're looking at another schematic of the iris, and you can see the layers here. When a tissue starts to become inflamed, it raises up and becomes white. This is considered the acute stage, and you can see it over here. It lifts up. As it becomes more subacute or more irritated, more inflamed, it becomes gray. As it becomes chronic, it becomes even darker gray, and as it becomes degenerated, it goes to the lowest layer. It becomes black. By the same token, as the tissues heal through the layers, these nip marks will start at the bottom layer until they come to the surface and become healed. It takes 2 months for an iris to show a change. Here in a real picture of an iris, we see the white acute marking. As it degenerates, it becomes gray, darker gray, which is chronic, and degenerated, which is black. So the healing signs, we can observe them, and they are white calcium luteum lines making a crisscrossing or knitting appearance. It shows regeneration. Herring's law of cure says that the process of healing starts from the inside and goes toward the outside of the body and from the top down. Here are some daisy petals that show healing marks or knit marks. Let's look at an open lesion quickly, and that is a weakness in the tissue, but it has not yet become a daisy petal. And here's one right here. You see, it's not formed an almond shape, it is simply open at both ends. This is easier to heal than something that is completely degenerated or blackened. Let's look at a closed lesion. Lesions that are encircled with a characteristic oval or teardrop shape. And here they are. One here and here. So let's look at a map now of the circulatory system. And this would be in the left iris. We see the heart, and included in the circulatory system are the blood vessels. What are we going to do if we see a weakness in the heart? Well, the purpose of using iridology, of course, is to not just determine what's weakened or very inflamed, but it's also to decide what herbs we're going to use to heal that. And for every organ in the body, there is an herb that we can use to heal the tissues. In the case of the the heart, we would use hawthorn berries. Here's a picture of an iris, and we're looking at the heart at 3 o'clock. And we're also seeing a weakness in the medulla. And that's at 1 o'clock. That's the part of the brain that is in charge of the heart and breathing. This is another picture. And this is sign, iris sign is called the double butterfly. We see the heart at 3 o'clock in the left eye. And this heart marking is piercing the autonomic nerve wreath. Right here is the autonomic nerve wreath. And inside the autonomic nerve wreath, we see there's some problem. And this would mean that there is a problem in the colon. And we also see a weakness at the medulla. So this iris sign in particular could be a person ready to have a heart attack. So it would really be great to help this person with the right, correct herbs before they have an event. So let's look at the modern day iridology consultation chart. This was developed by Dr. Bernard Jensen, and you can see the left iris and the right iris. Things that are on the left-hand side of the body will be in this iris, such as the heart right here at 3 o'clock. Notice how this chart is set up with the clock superimposed over each iris. Numbers 1 through 12. So we have a way of navigating our way and looking at the markings in the person's iris and then transferring them over to the map and drawing it so that we have now a representation of what we've seen. Here's an example of what's on the right-hand side of the body that isn't on the left. The liver and the pancreas and the gallbladder.
That was very good, Christine. I learned a lot. Leave our viewers with something with regard to iridology.
Oh, okay. First of all, it's never too late to feel great, and herbs really work.